Joe Biden was elected and inaugurated amazingly. And I think of that first bit of the Bible where it talks about God's breath over chaotic, violent waters. And I think that's the moment that we're certainly in. You can see the image of, hang on a second, the image of the woman on the superimposed on the America's flag. It's a suffering image and also a hopeful image. Many of you have come to know our work here in Brownsville and along the border through the Ports and Courts program, where you really witness the perversion of justice and were part of seeing when children were taken from their parents. And then the outcry, really led by so many people, but also by the churches, stopped that formal bit, that piece of it, for a while. It was a real tough time after that because the government shifted to metering people, so slowing their entrance into the United States, making them live on the other side while they waited to get into their constitutionally guaranteed hearing for asylum. It shifted to the migrant protection protocols, where they have these people in some of the most dangerous territories in the Americas for women and children and men. And then Title 42, coming along with the pandemic, set up yet another barrier. So we could absolutely be turned back into Mexico with no accounting for what was going on. During all of this, the border wall continued to be built and is continuing to be built. I would just, before I pass this along to my really great colleagues, remind everyone that asylum seekers are biblically placed upon us as an obligation to respond to. They're not caravans, they're not hordes, they're not spreaders of the plague, they're not irresponsible citizens or irresponsible parents. They're children and families. And what we found so many awful people also so very often is that they share our values. And I think the thing that stopped me so many times in conversations with them is when I ask, so why did you come here? And they say, because we believe in you and we trust you. And so I think with that sense of responsibility and obligation, I'd like to pass it along to Deaconess Cindy Johnson, who's been a constant presence with her husband in the Matamoros Asylum Camp. And so, Cindy? And you're on mute, Cindy.
Thank you, First United Methodist Women and ACLU, for inviting me here. Mike is always such a champion. And what I wanted to talk about is a camp in Matamoros. Straight out, it is a place which is inhumane. There's no running water, no electricity, no housing. People have tried to bring stuff in, but it's individual groups. And no matter how you paint the picture and bringing things in, it's still inhumane. It's horrible. There's also another thing that is very bothersome. They have no rights and their rights are being violated. They cannot have physical contact with their lawyers and work with lawyers, and they're being forced to stay there when they shouldn't be there. They've been there for over 2 years, some, where people have given birth and there's babies that are growing there and now are toddlers that have probably missed milestones, haven't gotten their vaccines, a lot of things that we are never going to be able to repair. It's been inhumane and it still is. The other thing that the conditions are bad. They've gone through a hurricane, coronavirus, the animals out there. For a while, there were so many rats, they would fall on the children and the people. Snakes, it was just horrible. It still is, and that's very important. The other thing, because some people are telling me to be patient and to pray, and I do that as a deaconess and everything, but it's very, very dangerous. There's still rapes going on. Anyone, if you would put someone in those conditions, they're being sequestered, there's still people being hurt. These things, some of this stuff, I don't even talk about it while I'm there, because I've been given, I don't know if I can talk about it here, Marcia. I've been given really, really direct things of how to keep even myself safe when I go over there with Mike, and Mike and I are going during the day, and then we come back. I used to go by myself at night to do some work. Now I have stopped doing that because it's gotten tougher. It's even more dangerous now than when we started. And those things have to be kept in mind, because some people are saying, well, we have to wait for this and that. Be patient. You can't be patient when inhumanity is happening. The other thing, I love all the mercy work and everything, but we have to do the advocacy. The migrants have advocated that it's the wrong place to be. They want to be out. We did postcards. They do not want to be there. No one there or myself can say it's okay for them to stay one extra day there. There has to be some way we can hold our country accountable and ourselves accountable, because no one should be in those conditions that whole time. Before, if something would happen to someone, I know there was no big backlash, but some people are dying daily. And there's a story right now that Mike might tell us about. It's just horrible conditions. I have felt scared there. And I want to tell you, it seems like I do my smiling there because I'm not going to cry in front of the people. But I've gotten home where I've been sick because of the things that they've told me. I am blessed that I have some great friends, and I read my Bible and I go to services and everything. But it is very, very difficult, and we put a good face on when we're there. But this is so inhumane. And I really want for there to be studies and for us to talk about this, because this should never happen to any people in this world again. And there is solutions. And I think maybe we'll talk about solutions. I've been with teams that have talked about the solutions. We have solutions right now to bring everyone over. Tomorrow we had to, but we are not doing it. I'll stop there. Michael?
Yeah, Cindy, could you talk about just visiting a tent, like a family you know about? Can you just describe it a little bit?
Yes, I've been there, and they've even asked me. I stayed one night there. I went, and they keep it as neat as they can, but everything's on the ground. It's dirt floors, of course. It's very hard to keep anything. At night, it gets, when it was cold, it gets very cold. When it's hot, it gets very hot. The families are all together in this little tent. The other thing is there's no places to go to the restroom. When I had to go to the restroom, I mean, I was about to cry. When I had to go to the restroom that night, the husband and the little girl got up because they wanted to check that the restroom was clean so I could go to it with a little flashlight. Imagine a little girl having to walk through the dirt. I mean, it's just horrible. No lighting. There's pitfalls, you could hurt yourself, but there's also all these things that are happening out there. The families have basic food to eat, but they don't have a choice. It's what's brought in. You could see the pictures of the tents. They try to keep things clean, but it's very difficult. You have to do everything by hand, and it's outdoors. They so much dignity that they have, but what we're putting people in, it's just horrible. It's not camping. Some people, it's camping. No, it isn't. They have to cook. They have to do everything in that area. There's showers, places, everyone. You couldn't even take showers because the water's running, and then they built some showers. Well, you're going to get athlete's feet. You're always have all these other medical and things that are going to happen if you're not careful. And the smell in some places is just horrible. There's also been a lot of deaths, and these children have seen it. These children have seen the death. That's where the mother, it's the mother of a son that died. I spent time with her. I still see her, and there's a little baby that's behind with her. Her son died there, and they dragged him through that River, there has been horrific things that these children witness and know. The parents try to shield them away from it, but it bothers my mind. Imagine children that have to live with these things and have seen these things happen. They talk to me about it, like, when are we going to leave? They know stuff about migration that how many more days? I mean, there's 2-year-olds that are talking like that. So there's some problems. There's been abuse all along. They were traumatized in their home country. They'll tell me about those horrible things, and they're still being traumatized here.
I think, thanks so much, Cindy. Many of you have been to that camp, not the one that's presently set up, which is enclosed. It's a much reduced from about the 2000, it's down to about 500 or 600 people. It's pretty much controlled by the cartels. All of these people are in our US system. I mean, we are responsible for them, but this is the way we've decided. We can talk about this, and we need to more and more, but I'd like to pass it over to Rochelle from just a slightly different viewpoint as an attorney, but also as a Brownsville resident and as an immigrant and as someone who spent much time in that camp as well.
Thank you, Mike. I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here and for listening to this. I think that makes such a huge difference in understanding what's happening, just to even like listen. So my name is Rochelle Garcia. I'm going to introduce myself to you all. I'm an attorney. I'm originally from Brownsville, Texas, here on the border, and born and raised. I initially started my legal practice or working as an attorney representing unaccompanied minors that were in immigration detention locally. In this region, in the Rio Grande Valley, there are actually over 4,000 bed spaces for unaccompanied minor children. When I was working representing these kids, there were about 2,000 kids in detention locally. So I had a lot of experience representing kids that were seeking asylum, that were fleeing, being trafficked for work or for sex. And a lot of kids that were fleeing abuse in their own homes. And, we have had a process for welcoming most of these children and processing them into the United States. So that was under the Obama administration. And as you all know, when the Trump administration began, they began to implement a lot of anti-immigrant, anti-asylum seeker programs and policies. And one of them was the Remain in Mexico program, as you heard about. And if you visited, you've seen the effects of it. That started at the beginning of 2019 and was implemented in our region in July of 2019. So I just to kind of color some of the things that Cindy has said, Tamaulipas, the state of Tamaulipas, where we are located, where this migrant encampment is classified as a level 4 do not travel area by the US State Department. And so it is not safe for US citizens to travel in the region. Yet the administration thought it was perfectly fine to send vulnerable immigrants into this region. And that matters because migrants in a lot of ways are cash to cartel elements, and they're used as currency, really. They're extorted, they're for their lives. Typically, they have family members in the US that will pay enormous amounts of money to see that their loved one continues to live and to be freed. They're constantly under extortions. They have no choice other than to live in these encampments for safety reasons, because there's safety in numbers. Yet, as Cindy highlighted, there are a lot of problems in these encampments. There's a lot of insecurity. People are kidnapped, people are killed, they're raped, and a lot of horrific things are happening to folks. And I know it's easy for a lot of Americans to turn a blind eye to this, because they're like, well, we don't know them. We don't know, we understand that they might be bringing, drugs, or they're criminals, or, it's easy to write these folks off, but that is absolutely not the reality. I have been working with the ACLU of Texas since early March. And so we went and we talked to people that were being sent back into their Maine and Mexico program. And we found that there were a lot of pregnant women that were just being thrown into Tamaulipas without any concern for their safety. There were certain protocols that were listed that they were not going to send back anybody who had a medical vulnerability. That's absolutely not the case. We saw children with disabilities. We saw pregnant women. We saw people that had gunshot wounds that were untreated. And there was no distinction between those folks and anybody else. And, as part of some of the legal work we've done, we filed complaints, and we were able to bring to light a lot of information. And ultimately, Mexico stopped accepting pregnant women back into the program. But that's only one piece of the bigger picture. Remain in Mexico is a very small piece of what has happened and what needs to be undone in this new administration. Mike mentioned at the top of the hour about Title 42 and these expulsions of children, of families and adults from the country without any sort of due process. And I always like to explain to people, like, why does this matter overall? Why does it matter how you treat immigrants? Because the way that you treat immigrants, or the lesser of us, is the way you're going to treat everyone eventually. And that's the thing about the law. Once you make a rule, or you make an exception to a rule, it snowballs and it becomes a problem for everyone. So the barometer for civil rights in this country is how we treat people at the border, how we treat immigrants, because that is how it's going to transition to everyone else in this country being treated. So it matters for those regards. I also just want to stress the fact that, we have a new administration. The work is not done. There are ways that all of us as individuals can put pressure on our elected officials, because now is the time. Now is the time to continue putting pressure, writing to your congressional representatives, writing to your senators, and letting them know that you want to see us treat immigrants in a better way, that we want these policies undone, that we want to have a humane way of welcoming people into our country, because that is the right thing to do. So with that, I'll kick it back to Mike. I don't know if you have any other questions, or I think you're on mute.
Yes, just real quick, I think the ACLU of Texas is very happy to help with talking points to legislators. There's a couple of distinctions. It's all very complicated. At the end of the day, though, it's that baby in Pampers in front of a guy and a bunch of other guys with guns who seem to be afraid of this baby. Rochelle and I know this baby. Cindy does too. Marcia knows babies like this. It does come down to that. What do we do with that? Well, there's a couple of avenues. We are citizens. This is our thing. And we can send that in later to the group through email or some other ways. There's the state of Texas's stance on this. We right now still are spending $2 billion to have state troopers on the border to track down people who seem to look like these folks. There is a federal thing. It is a messy mess that Trump has created. It is going to take a lot of work by the Biden administration. And it would be I think they'd be very happy for it to just magically disappear. There's no magic, there's hard work, and by God, there's the churches behind this. So we can fix this, we really can.
Yeah, Mike, and one more point to make is, because somebody made a point on the chat about local rules and all of that. What we've seen in Texas is, cooperation between local police and immigration enforcement. And that is something that you in your city, you can have control over. There are cities that are making it a point to say, you know, we don't want to target immigrants. Because in targeting immigrants and making them fearful of even like having, making a police report if they need to, or accessing the police, you're making the entire community less safe. So that is a way, and we can obviously provide support, as Mike mentioned, but that is a way that you can do something locally that will have an impact.
And this is going to be great because we're going to have some time for questions. And I think I'm afraid to introduce Marcia, so I'm just going to let her introduce herself. I don't know if she's on mute. You're muted, Marcia.
That's kind of scary since we are married that he's afraid to introduce me. That says a lot about me, maybe? I'm not sure. Yeah.
I'm improving my vocabulary.
Oh, okay. I would just want to thank B and all of you for inviting us, and Sarah and Scott as well. Thank you very much for making this possible. And thanks all of y'all that came down and all of you that care enough to be on this conversation today with us. And it's, I think Mike would say, you know, it's a conversation we want to have, that we want to keep having everywhere. So, but you are our voice, and you can be in conversation where we cannot be. So I am Dr. Marcia Griffin. I'm a pediatrician on the border. I have worked with immigrant children and families for over a decade, since 2006 when I first finished my residency and came back to the border. I used to live in Harlingen. I came back to the border in Brownsville to work at a community health center. And at our community health clinic saw mostly immigrant families, mixed status families. So the kids might be U.S. citizens, or the mother's a U.S. citizen and the grandmother's not, and a lovely, lovely mixture of lovely families. It is a privilege to work with them and an honor. Since 2014, and the surge of unaccompanied kids and families coming to the border seeking asylum, I have helped organize the medical teams of volunteers who have been providing medical care when they cross the border into this country, and they're given permission to go north to travel to their families. So it's at these shelters that are accepting these families who've been given permission to be here that I do my work with my colleagues. So not only organizing the medical volunteers, but also raising money to have paid staff at these shelters to be able to take care of these folks. The number of families since 2014 have fluctuated every year. And so they've gone up and down from a handful to 1,000 people a day that we would see at the respite center in McAllen during 2018 to just a handful again. But most of those who are coming across are young families who are very healthy and who came fleeing horrible violence, as Cindy and Mike and Rochelle have told you, coming looking to us. And no matter how many numbers were coming in the shelter every day, there was some obvious things that doctors started noticing, and that any of you could notice, is that the most vulnerable among them were the children with disabilities or serious illnesses and the pregnant women, honestly. And so we as physicians were trying to figure out solutions for this, because the children, we could give them triage care here in the shelters and take care of them. But what they really needed was when they were going to get on a bus and go, or get on a plane and be gone in 24 hours. And they needed care there in LA or San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Baltimore, Miami, Houston, Dallas, Austin, Amarillo. They needed help there, and we needed to find a way to do that. So from, about 2017, 18, several physicians, actually 6 pediatricians, me and 5 others from myself and 1 other at my institution, which is the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley School of Medicine, Stanford School of Medicine, Texas Children's Hospital in Houston, came together to try to figure out some solutions that what did these families need and what could we use with our power as physicians, the position we have in community and, in the nation to make a difference for them. And so we started a consortium that would start building programs. One of those programs is called Babies at Our Borders. And Babies at Our Borders, we started with these 3 institutions, Stanford, Texas Children's, UTRGV here on the border, and an organization called Migrant Clinician Network, which for over 35 years has been connecting the migrating poor to clinical facilities so that they could get care. And I used to sit on their board, and was very proud to be a part of that organization, Migrant Clinician Network. And so I knew about them and knew that we needed them because they're teams of caseworkers, and their motto is born to care. And that could describe the people on this call today. You are born to care. And so we created Babies at Our Borders. And what it does is, you see these women here, they're 2 of the women who came across. And in our area, I know Rochelle says, they don't allow pregnant women. They were turning them around, they were turning them away, and they have. But also, our Border Patrol in this region were able to decide what serious medical conditions constituted a condition to allow them in. I work with Border Patrol as a relationship because I need to, because we need to work hand in hand. And there may be some really bad apples there, but there are also some really good people there who care, and they don't want to be taking care of kids. They don't want to be babysitting kids. They want to go after the bad guys. And so we work together to try to figure out solutions. And so what one of the deputy chiefs here decided was 3rd trimester mothers was a serious condition, and they needed to allow them in. Any child and their children, any child with a disability or a serious disease or condition needed to be let in. So a child with seizure disorder or spina bifida, which is a malformation of their spine, which has their spinal canal, their spinal cord exposed, or a cancer or a heart defect, or any number of problems such as that they would be allowed in. And so what we did is we created this with this Babies at Our Borders to connect these mothers with prenatal care all over the country. And so they can get into clinics to get vital prenatal care, because we can save babies and save mothers if we screen them before they deliver. If we know if they've got some problem, we can help them. And so we connect them with case managers at the shelter and on the phone to actual appointments in their destination. So they may be coming to Amarillo. We're going to call the clinic there and get an appointment for that mother and that child to get in and to get care. They could be going to Houston. The children with complex care needs, they need specialty care. So they may need a neurologist or a cardiologist or an orthopedist. We need those. So our group of 6 pediatricians and migrant clinicians went, how can we solve that? Well, we all sit on the board of the, sit in committees on the American Academy of Pediatrics. We have connections across the country. So we formed an organization, an army of champions in 15 of the top medical schools in the 15 most common destinations where families are going. So it is the LA, San Francisco, Houston, it's those communities. And so when a baby comes across or a child is in need, then we can connect them with a champion in Dallas. And that champion finds them a clinic. And then that champion is connected to the subspecialist. And so they work out how to get either charity care or connected to some kind of insurance, say they're in Bexar County or Harris County, some kind of thing that would help them. And they get them an appointment as soon as possible and urgently if necessary to get that kind of care. So this year, as Cindy and Rochelle have said, and Mike, those numbers dwindled down. In March, they enforced Title 42. At that point, our numbers went to almost nothing. But because Border Patrol were letting in the pregnant women, we continued to see pregnant women. So in this past year, we saw 679 immigrants at the shelter come through. 413 of these were pregnant or postpartum mothers with their infants, and 225 of those were children. And so we took care of those, and then we connected them to care across the country. Of those that we have had documented, we've had 160 something births, and 2 of those babies died. And we've had 4 sets of twins. And so we celebrate our successes and we mourn our losses. But these people are so fragile. They've all been subjected to trauma, as Cindy so eloquently stated, and they need connected to care. I'm just going to share 2 stories from this past month of children that we took care of. One was a child that was not here, but had come across here and was at the family detention center in Dilley. And this child had come in, she was 6 years old, and she had been there she came in and she had been there 2 months. The child had been tortured in her home country in front of her mother, where the gangs were forcing her mother in extortion for money. And they tortured the child so badly that it broke her arm. And and was so injured and she was not able to get proper care, that this girl's arm is now deformed. The mother gave the gang the money, and then in the middle of the night, she ran with her daughter. And she came across here and then was sent to Dilley. In Dilley, ICE refused to get her surgery on her arm, despite the fact that she could not feed herself, nor could she dress herself because her hand would not go to her face. And so we were able to get her released. And then through our organizations of champions across the country, we're able to get her into care. She landed in a small community outside of Boston, and now she is having her orthopedic surgery to repair her arm. She's having it this week. That's one. Another one was a mother who came across the shelter, and she came in and she was leaving quickly to go to Baltimore, outside of Baltimore area. And this mother was pregnant, but she wasn't worried about herself. She was worried about her 5-year-old daughter who came with her, who she had found out that had been continuously sexually molested for 2 years by a male member of their household. She was only 5. She got her out of there and got her here. She stayed in Matamoros, in those camps, and she was gang raped. And she was pregnant because of that. And she was worried about her little girl. She is connected to care in Baltimore, where there's a pediatrician like me that does all this work for nothing, that just cares deeply and deeply about taking care of these kids. And she and the mother will get the kind of counseling that's culturally humble and sensitive, and get them into community, because within community that they begin to heal. The work I do, I feel, for years is my witness. I was born and raised a Methodist. I grew up in Mesquite, Texas, right outside of Dallas. Many of you may know. But my family drove 30 minutes to go to the church that my grandparents helped found, Brooklyn Avenue Methodist Church, which over the last 20 years has had to close. But Brooklyn Avenue Methodist Church raised me. So every Sunday we'd go to morning church, we'd go to Sunday school, then we'd have lunch with my grandparent, and then we would go to Methodist Youth Fellowship in the afternoon, and we would go to chapel time. We'd go to evening service for altar prayer time. We might go back on Wednesday, and then if the youth fellowship group was going to have a car wash or an event on Saturday, we'd drive back and do that on Saturday. That was my life. It formed me. My parents and my siblings do not have the same political leaning. They are much more conservative than I am. And once, a few years ago, my dad and mother, several years ago, moved to East Texas, to far East Texas, and they go to a little tiny Methodist church out there in Winsboro, Texas. And we're driving in the truck, and I'm sitting in the back seat of the truck, and Dad and Mom are in the front seat, and Dad said, "Marcia, your mom and I just really wonder sometimes why you do the work you do. You have all these stories, and you hear all this tragedy, and why do you do this work?" And one of y'all put it in the chat. And I said to Dad, "Well, I spent my life growing up with you in the church. And what part of love thy neighbor was I not supposed to believe? Lo, though you did it for the least among us, you did it to me. Suffer the little children and forbid them not to come to me, for they're the kingdom of God." What part of this are we not supposed to believe? It's what I believe. And it's what, till the day I die, I will be working with these families, because they bring the kingdom of God to me. I am blessed every day that I get to fight for them. So thank you for having us. Thank you for what you do. Please help us have these conversations in your communities, your congregations, and across the country. Thank you.
That left me breathless, and I think also inspired. Now we have 15 minutes to go through a whole lot of things. For my part, before I flip back over to these incredible panelists, is reminding of the place of church in all this. There is a lot of people out there that want us to be afraid of the immigrant, and it's fearful things. So like, how do you parse that? Someone put in the chat about seeing a car going down the road with a El Chapo on it. That's like really frightening. And I, for myself personally, step back and think, what would it mean to that asylum seeker to see that car in Dallas or wherever? That would scare me to death. So as a citizen, of course, I'm like, oh my Lord, what is this all about? But I'd like to think of the least amongst us, what are they seeing? And does that move me to do something? So appreciate it. Let me just real quick, Cindy, do you want to add anything before we grab it? We may not get to all the questions, but we are available.
I just wanted to add, and Marcia got it, is what are we as people of faith required to do, and as United Methodist Women? And it's exactly what Marcia said. We're honored to do this work, and we're seeing God's face when we're doing this. So that's all I wanted to. I didn't emphasize that. Why do we do this? Well, it's what we're called to do. And Marcia, it was beautiful listening to you.
Well, I was able to get from my grandmother when she died, her Methodist women's pin and one of her handkerchiefs. So it stays in my special drawer here.
Cindy, could you put, if you don't mind, putting your email address, because I know some people want to send immediate assistance or something. They could reach out to you.
Yeah, and
you might want to do that.
They can put, they can send it. I got a Vivo, but I have a, and I'll put it there. It is Elvira District, and all they got to put is Deaconess Cindy Johnson, and it comes to me from the Methodist Church. And what I do is take funds over there for medication, basic medication, and I'm hoping it'll be over real soon. If there's any leftover funds, we'll take it to La Posada. Marcia works there. That is a place where we might need the funds. That way I'll clean my hands with any funds, but right now we do need desperately funds for continuing the medication.
And I think Marcia too, if you could put in the chat the link to Babies at Our Borders, if that's all right.
Oh, thank you. You know, give to this deaconess over here that she's on my right over here on my screen. But we have ongoing funding that we do through communityforchildren.com, and that raises the money for us to have a midwife that goes to the shelters and sees the pregnant women, and then that the caseworkers to be able to connect them to care. I'll put that in the chat. There was something I was going to say, but now I've forgotten.
It'll come back. And then
something Cindy said.
Speaking for Rochelle, myself, we're not going to ask for donations to the ACLU. I would ask so that you join us. You do not have to pay dues. We love knowing that there's someone in Richardson, Texas that we can send an email to and say, oh, and by the way, your state rep needs talking to by somebody from the church. So if you can do that, that's appreciated. And we promise we won't sell you car insurance or anything like that, just to let you know what's going on. Rochelle, did you have any kind of reaction to Marcia or Cindy that you wanted to?
I really genuinely appreciate everyone here on this panel. I mean, the work that everybody does is just so, it takes a lot out of you as an individual, and to give that much love back to other people, it's really hard, and it's a really beautiful thing to do. And I am completely encouraged by being surrounded by such wonderful people. You guys are fantastic. And the only other thing that I think I would add in terms of like the legal stuff is that all of these things that we're seeing were done within the executive branch, were done within the administration. And so it's right now what we're seeing is Biden has been signing executive orders to kind of undo all of this damage and this trauma that's been inflicted. But it's not going to be enough until we get immigration reform passed through Congress. So I just wanted to make that very clear, is that, you know, what we've experienced over the last 4 years was just this like unprecedented assault on the rights of immigrants and of people along the border, and that it can be undone. And that's by voting. I mean, that's how we got to this place, right? Voting, by being engaged. And yes, so I just want to echo, like, yes, join us, share your information, connect with us, you know, because people power really makes a huge impact.
One other thing I wanted to add. Oh, I'm sorry, Cindy, you go ahead.
Real quick, don't forget, a lot of people even that we're working with saying, let's take it easy, let's wait. We can't wait with uniting the children, MPP. We can do these things during the pandemic because they're in such horrible, horrible conditions. So please keep on pushing for that and don't give in to that narrative.
Okay. So I had the distinct honor and privilege, and I'm not sure why, to meet with the transition team for immigration and a lot of leaders in the legal advocacy and world. And so we did share that message of urgency, but also that this is a government problem that needs a government solution. And so that can happen quickly, but we've got to have the testing. We have to have child welfare people here. We have to have doctors here. We cannot separate a baby that's always been raised by their grandmother and separate her from her grandmother. That's her family. All these things have to be looked at, and we have no time to waste. So there's an urgency, we're pressing, but don't just do it because tomorrow you'll have a humanitarian disaster on your hands. So we're working behind the scenes to do it. Let me also say that we're not just doing the shelters here. Like, we have made relationships, and I'm now working with Jewish Family Services in San Diego and connecting their pregnant women and children with big urological, like their all their bladder and kidney, what didn't form right. This child needs to be seen. We're connecting a child for them. El Paso, Laredo, San Benito, Brownsville. So we're connected to all of these shelters, getting them into care. And so we are poised to expand, and we just need everybody's cry out that this needs to happen. Needs to happen.